Well, hello random YouTube people, and welcome along to another episode of DIY Bri. A few years ago, on my honey-do list, my wife wanted me to make these interchangeable wall hanging decorations. So you can see it's just two pieces of wood with these little clips, and you can swap out the photos with any photos that you want for any time of year. Unlike regular picture frames, these are really cool because you can just swap out the photos. You can change them to a different time of year, like October. We swapped them out with photos of costumes that we had worn in previous years. With the extra wood, I made something from my office to hold the pictures of my family so I can look at them while I work from home. You can see I just added the same concept to this straight piece of wood. It's also a great way to remember those that have passed on. I added two more for this wall, which makes it look a lot more full, and it's geometrically better and more pleasing to the eye. So stick around to find out how easy it is to make these interchangeable wall decorations where you can swap out the photos. Stay tuned. Subscribe. As I mentioned, these are super easy to make. It's just two pieces of wood joined together with some screws, and I'm going to show you exactly how I did it. Now, you have to determine what kind of photos and what size you want. These photos are 8x10 photos. The pieces of wood that I used, you can just grab right from Home Depot or Lowe's. They are about 5.5 inches wide, and then the pieces of wood are about 4 feet long, which means just two of these pieces of wood will get you 3 picture frames. So here with the measuring tape, you can see it's about 5.5 inches wide. Just so you know what to look for at Lowe's or Home Depot, these are about 3/4 inch thick. Now with those measurements in mind, let's talk about the design. Let's go ahead and remove that photo. Now this is two pieces of wood connected together, one on the top and one on the bottom. Each are that 5.5 inches wide, which makes the total of this 11 inches tall. As I mentioned earlier, the photo is an 8x10, which means in landscape mode, the height is 8 inches. With the height of the backing of the frame being 11 inches minus 8 inches of the photo leaves us with 3 inches. 3 inches of padding. Now since there's space above and below the photo, we need to divide that by 2, leaving us with 1.5 inches above and 1.5 inches below. To give us an even border around the photo, we're going to use that same 1.5 inch spacing on the left and right side as well. Now to determine the width of the frame, we're going to take that 1.5 inches on both sides, which totals 3 inches, plus the width of the photo, which is 10 inches, which gives us a total of 13 inches for the width of our frame, which brings the total size of this frame to 11 by 13. Now let's talk about the position of the clips. You see the photo is pushed into the clips most of the way, and we know that the top of the photo is down 1.5 inches from the top from our previous measurements. If you look at the clip, you can see above this blue line there are some holes in the clip where we're going to drill our screws. When I measure down to the hole of those clips, it's about 1 inch. I decided to bring them in 4 inches from each side. So those holes are going to be drilled at 4 inches from each side, down 1 inch. Now that we have our plan and our design, let's go ahead and start making them. I have my 5.5 by 4 feet pieces of wood up on my miter saw. The first thing I'm going to do is just to cut off the edge because it's really jaggedy when you get these sometimes, and I want a nice clean edge for my frames. Now I could take a measuring tape and measure out that 13 inches and draw a line and repeat that process. But since I have these picture frames already up and I want to make sure that they look exactly the same and they are the exact same size, I'm just going to take the picture frame with me to the miter saw so I can draw my line with the frame. And that way I know that the cut I'm making is going to be exactly the same width as the picture frames that I already have. Now because I held up the picture frame on the right side of the board and drew the line on the left side, I need to actually flip this board around, so I'm marking the wood to know which side to cut on. If I were to cut right now, I would cut about 1/8 inch off into my 13 inches because the blade is on the wrong side of the line. Anyways, flipping that board around to make our first cut. You can see that 13 inches is now on the left side. We're cutting on the right side of the line, which means the left side is going to remain 13 inches wide. Now with that fresh 13 inch section I just cut, I'm going to stack it on top of the rest of the wood and use it to mark my next 13 inches, so I don't have to use my measuring tape every single time. One thing that you can do that I do all the time, instead of always drawing a line to know where you need to cut, you can just stack the board right on top of the board you're going to cut and line it up with the blade. So you can see I'm pushing it into the blade to know exactly where I need to cut on the next board underneath it. So I'm just using it as a template to line up for my next cut. And look at that, perfectly lined up. Of course, just repeat this process over and over again until you have enough 13-inch sections for the amount of frames that you're going to make. 2 per frame. Now the next step is really where the magic happens. You can see these funny looking holes. If you are not familiar with them, those are called pocket holes. In woodworking, a pocket hole is a specialized angled hole drilled into one piece of wood to join it to another using screws. Pocket holes are a strong connection that are used in cabinet making and furniture assembly as well. To make our pocket holes, we're going to use a woodworking jig. In this case, one that's called a Craig jig. Craig is just a brand, but it's well known in the world of carpentry that a Craig jig is something that's used for pocket holes. So here we go with my Craig jig. I will put the Craig jig and all products seen in this video in the video description. Right now you can see I'm just lining up the pieces of wood on the floor to see which 2 pieces fit best together and look best together for a frame. After determining which pieces of wood look best together, I'm using my pencil to draw some arrows to tell me which 2 sides point together to make the centerpiece of this frame. Now on to the Craig jig. There are many different versions of the Craig jig. The one that I have, you can see there's a center section that pops out, and you set the thickness of the board you're going to drill into. In this case, we are drilling into the 3/4 inch thick, like I mentioned earlier. When drilling the pocket holes, you want to make sure they are on the side of wood that you want to be joined to another piece of wood. The arrows on my piece of wood are indicating the side of the wood that's going to be joined to another piece. So we're going to put that side down in the Craig jig just like this. So when I drill my hole, the hole is going to be on the correct downward side, if you will. As far as where to put the screws and where to drill the holes, that's up to you. Since these are not going to be holding any kind of weight, it doesn't really matter. They just need to join the pieces of wood together. So when we have our spot that we want to drill, we're going to pull the Craig jig lever like this to hold it in place. And now the Craig jig comes with a very specialized drill, and there's a little collar on it you can see which stops you from drilling too deep. And the Craig jig comes with a template to help you create and set up that collar. So here you can see I've decided where I wanted to put my hole, and I've gone ahead and drilled, and now I have a pocket hole. You do not need a lot of pocket holes. The pocket hole connection is very strong. So I'm going to put 2 on one side, and then I'm going to do 3 on the other side, I believe, just to pull this together, and you'll see how it looks in just a second. So here I'm lining it up for my next hole, and I'm going to pull down on that lever again just to secure the piece of wood in the Craig jig, and here we go. I'm drilling my next hole. So here I'm holding up the piece of wood I just drilled 2 pocket holes in and holding up the other piece. So I'm not going to drill holes on the sides in this case. On this other piece on the bottom, I'm going to drill another hole in the middle so that it combines them into the middle, and the middle is strong as well as the outside. So let's go ahead and drill the holes for this next one. And remember, I put the Craig jig, I put the piece of wood in the Craig jig with the arrows facing down because that's where I want the pocket hole to go to point to the other piece of wood. So here we go with our last holes on this particular frame. Now that our holes have been drilled, we're going to fasten them together with these special pocket hole screws. Of course, they come in different sizes depending on the project that you're trying to do, and they have a special square head or this particular square bit that the Craig jig comes with. So we're going to go ahead and line up the pieces of wood to make sure that they're all fitting together correctly, and then we're going to go ahead and grab a brace or a clamp to pull the wood pieces together so that they're nice and lined up before we start to drill these holes, just so that when they go into the wood, they're nice and straight and everything lines up and pulls together correctly. Now just grabbing a 1-inch pocket hole screw and attaching it to the bit, and I'm going to line up that screw in the pocket hole that we drilled earlier. Then go ahead and fasten that together. And you'll notice as you drill these together, it's going to squeeze the wood pieces nice and firmly together. It's really nice. I love these pocket hole screws, they're so cool. For this particular project, it doesn't really matter which screw you put in first, but I'm going to go ahead and put in the 2 sides first and then do the centers, and making sure that everything stays lined up along the way so that the frame doesn't end up all wobbly and uneven. You can see I'm kind of putting my weight on it because it's not lining up quite right. So I'm going to make sure I push some down on this particular one so that when I drill the screw, the wood pieces are still lined up, and it lines up perfectly when I'm done. Now just going into fast forward mode as I add the rest of the screws. And look at that, doesn't this look snazzy? At this point, depending on how smooth your wood is, you might want to go back in and do some sanding just to make sure that everything looks nice and flat and smooth, but that's up to your discretion. You could even put some wood filler in the crack. Whatever you want to do, that's really up to you. Next part, also not necessary, but depending on the kind of wood you got, you might want to go through and do a stain. I like my dark walnut. And here I'm just applying some of that dark walnut stain on the back. I tried two different methods, brushing it on with a paintbrush, as well as just dipping a rag in the stain itself and then rubbing it into the wood. It does a lighter coat if you do it that way. If you want it dark, I'd recommend grabbing that paintbrush because it's going to lay that stain on a lot thicker and rubbing it in with a rag. And this is what it looks like compared to my existing frames. The dark walnut that I used before isn't quite the same color, so I'm probably going to have to go back and restain the others just so they all match and look the same. At the beginning of the video, we already talked about the position of the screws, but just to make sure that my new frames match my existing frames, I'm going to go ahead and take off the picture and take off those clips and make sure I get the screw measurements so that they're in the exact same place so that everything looks good. So it looks like on my existing frame, those holes aren't quite at the 1 inch mark, they're a little bit above. So I'm just going to take note of that and make sure I drill my new holes in that same place. But when you're doing yours, you make sure that you do yours so that it looks nice and centered and looks good. So don't follow this exactly, just make sure that your picture looks nice and centered when you hang it. But yeah, that's a little bit above the 1 inch mark. For my existing frame, the hole from the right side is pretty much right on the money for the 4 inch mark. You can see, lines up pretty good. And now measuring the other hole on the left side, that looks like it also is coming in at the 4 inch mark. Pretty cool. So yeah, 4 over and 1 down is pretty much what we're going to do if your frame is 13 inches wide. Now the final part of this that we haven't talked about yet is how to hang it to the wall. I decided to do a single D-clip ring in the middle. You can also do those sawtooth clips, one on each side, but then you're going to have to do more measuring and make sure that each side lines up. I decided to do this one little screw so that when I do hang it to the wall, I'm only adding 1 screw to the wall. So the middle measurement, of course, from 13 inches would be 6.5 to be dead center. And on the back side, it looks like I came down 2 inches for the screw hole on the back side for that D-ring clip. Just remember that this wood is only 3/4 inch thick, so make sure that the screw you put in on the back side, or the front side for that matter, are not long enough to go through the other side. So here I go adding that D-ring to the back side of this picture frame. And there we are, it's looking great. The D-ring is installed on the back, and I've gone ahead and added those clips to the front at the measurements that we discussed. We are almost done with this. There's one last thing to discuss. That D-ring on the back, you can see we put it down 2 inches, but the top of the D-ring is just above 1 inch. That's a measurement you're going to want to remember when you go to put the screws in the wall to hang these. But don't these look fantastic? Here's our 2 new interchangeable picture frames. Let's go hang them on the wall. Now I'm not going to talk about all the measurements I made for my wall because your wall might be completely different. You might have more or less picture frames than I do. Just when you're doing the mounting, remember all of the measurements that we've done and how far down you need to take your screw because of the D-clip if you did that. But I really do like those particular screws that I just showed right here. They are great for picture hanging. So here we go with our little D-clip, and let's go ahead and mount that to the wall and see what we look like. And with that 1 screw on the wall, it's just so easy to hang the picture frame because you only have to mount one part of it. And that, random YouTube people, is just how easy it is to add these awesome interchangeable wall hanging picture frames. If you made it to the end of this video, thank you so much for watching. If you find my content relatable or informative, please give this video some kind of interaction, such as smashing that like button, commenting, and sharing this video with all of your friends. This helps the YouTube algorithms know how to share my content with other random people just like you. And to be sure you don't miss out on future bodacious content, subscribe. Subscribe.